AITA for shutting down Black names because I think it'll make life harder on my kids. My spouse and I are expecting our first child. I'm a mixed-race person, half black and half white. My hubby is a black man. We don't know the gender yet, but my spouse favors names for boys that most people would consider black names. Trayvon, Devont, Marquis, and other similar names. I grew up with a name associated with black culture and despised it for the most of my life. Because of how people respond to my government name, I go by a shorter version of my name professionally, i.e. D for Denasia. I'm sure I've been passed over for career opportunities due to how others view my name. My spouse is a name that is more typically associated with white boys, i.e. Jade. He wants a strong black name for our baby since he never had one, and he feels that giving him a white name to prevent racism is counterproductive. I don't disagree, but I don't want to alter it by using our kid as a pig. This has turned into a war. I understand that we both need to agree on a baby name, but AITA for excluding all black names. Update: I was having trouble deciding on a name for our kid. We had previously settled on a girl's name to commemorate his mother, but we can't decide on a boy's name. My spouse felt it was crucial for our kid to have a name that was deeply rooted in African American tradition. Because I am multiracial and grew up with a stereotyped black name, I want a more neutral name. We found out we were expecting a boy and settled on a name for him. Miles Trayvon will be his name. It seemed like a good compromise to us. My husband's family is notorious for using middle names, so we'll most likely be known as Trey to the majority of them. When he starts school, his name will be just Miles, last name. He may be Miles T, last name, if he prefers not to use Trayvon, but he can equally simply go by Trayvon if he feels more linked to that name. This alternative provides him with a choice, which my spouse and I both believed was critical. My husband despised growing up with a traditional white boy name, which he claimed drew snide remarks from others in his neighborhood who considered him as less black. He mentioned how in 8 Mile, Eminem's character asks things like, "Is this man a?" Clarence is his given name. That isn't to suggest my spouse aspired to be a gangster. He's an actuary, but he claimed his name had a part in further separating him from his black friends while he was growing up. I experienced the opposite experience. My mother is white, and my father is black. They chose a stereotypical black name, which I believe made my life more difficult. Professionally and privately, I go by a moniker. When I discussed it with my spouse, I discovered it began at a young age. I recall being around 4 years old and going out with my white grandmother. A lady approached me, caressed my hair, told my grandmother I was lovely, and then inquired as to my name. Her name is Daisy, my grandmother stated instead of my given name. I went to an HBCU and eventually felt happy with my given name, but I saw that many seniors with black names utilized shorter versions of their names on employment applications. Raquin Smith, for example, would write Ray Smith, DeMarcus Jones, Marcus Jones, Keshonda Nelson, Shauna Nelson, and so on. They told you how to work inside the system, so I did. Anyway, I apologize for the lengthy update. I simply wanted to convey why this meant so much to both of us. We didn't really go into it until after I commented here, so thank you for sparking that conversation. Before anybody says anything, I am aware that some people may associate Trayvon with Trayvon Martin. That is not why we are using it. I mentioned it on Name Nerds, and a lot of people were furious, but I didn't want to insult anybody. It's a surname from my husband's family. Story 2. AITA for refusing to kick my best friend out of my apartment and making my boyfriend and his kid leave. Our relationship has only been 5 months, but since then I've observed that my 24 female boyfriend, 28 male, is really eager to get things done, wanting me to meet his mom in our 3rd date, meeting his kid before we became official, etc., etc. He also doesn't like the connection I have with my closest buddy Frank, 24M, but I've made it plain that I will not abandon Frank simply because he's envious of my friendship with him. Frank and I first met when we were 6 years old and quickly became closest friends after going through a horrible incident. He is the person in whom I have the greatest faith, and our connection is entirely platonic. While they're cordial, mainly Frank to be honest, they're not friends, and my boyfriend refuses to spend any more time with them than is absolutely necessary. I was looking for a roommate a few weeks ago and approached my female buddy first. When she declined, I approached my brothers and Frank, who both agreed. I didn't want to ask my partner because I felt it was too soon. I didn't feel ready, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be in charge of a little child at this point in our relationship. As soon as I told him about my choice over the phone, he lost his cool and stated that I should have told him instead. I was entirely honest with him, and he just responded with, "Nonsense, let me solve it," and hung up the phone. Even though I was perplexed, I had the impression that he would do anything to bring us closer together. In the end, he arrived up the following day with his child and their belongings, which Frank and I didn't understand at first until he ordered him to go out, and that he would take care of me, which I refused to accept since I didn't want to live with him and requested him to please get out. He attempted to push it, but Frank intervened, threatening to call the police and stating that it was unfair to the youngster. My ex-boyfriend departed shortly after that. Despite the fact that I am very certain that we ended up breaking up, my friends believe that I should have handled the situation differently and that Frank was far out of line when he brought the police into the picture. However, since there was a child involved, I'm feeling like a jerk, and I believe that I owe an apology to the family. Story 3. AITA for not letting my possible drug addict brother stay in my house. My brother, a 28-year-old man, and I, a 30-year-old man, did not grow up together. As children, he spent his time with his father, while I spent mine with our mother. In order for us to be able to play and communicate, he would visit my home once a month, and during summer vacation, I would visit my father's place. Since he was 7 years old, he has stolen items from my home when he becomes enraged. A tiny disagreement between us, which is quite natural for toddlers, would result in his taking something with him in his pockets. Nothing too costly, just everyday items such as food, pencils, and so forth. My father would bring him back a few hours later, and he would return the items he had taken and express his regret. As the years passed, the situation became worse. When our family began to notice, it progressed to the point that he was institutionalized for psychiatric therapy when he was 12 years old. This caused our relationship to come to a grinding halt, and I just lost all interest in engaging with him as a result. When he was 14 years old, he became to narcotics and began selling the items he had stolen from our family properties. He became clever in the hope that no one would notice, and even his therapy wasn't helping. I had a major disagreement with my family a few days before I left for college because he'd stolen some of my money, and they were furious when I recommended that we put him in a drug treatment facility that was available in my city. They agreed a few days after I left, and he was sent to treatment. Almost 12 years later, despite the fact that I had no contact with my family, my brother managed to get my phone number and call me, stating that he would need a place to stay in a few days since he was about to split up with his girlfriend. I asked for our mother's phone number, which he provided, and I contacted her to get an update on what had transpired in the intervening 12 years. For the first 7 years, my brother was completely free of drug addiction and didn't steal anything from them. But after that, he began to smoke in small amounts again, and expensive items began to disappear from my relatives' homes after he had visited them. But according to my mother, last year, we all talked to him and he has stopped doing drugs. However, according to some other relatives, he is still involved in drug dealing and theft, and that I should not allow him to remain in my home. I became perplexed, so I went to his Facebook page, where he still seems to be an addict. However, his girlfriend appears to be a decent and healthy person. Therefore, I do not believe she is an addict. Furthermore, it seems that they earn decent money, therefore I'm perplexed as to why he would be stealing. He phoned me today, and I informed him that I wouldn't allow him to remain in my home with me. He became enraged, claiming that he had nowhere to stay since none of our family, including our parents, would allow him to remain at their homes with them. My fiancé believes I should let him remain, but I believe he might be a risk to our kid, who is only 2 months old, since he does not like children and may still be addicted to drugs.